Street's become kind of a rite of passage, like Wizard of Oz or King Kong.
3, 4, better lock your door.
Like Dracula or Frankenstein, Freddy became so bigger than life. And in a way, we started kind of loving what he does to us and for us.
There's two ways you can confront a killer in a horror film. One is to be terrified of him or her, and the other is to kind of flip over and identify with him or her.
5, 6, grab your crucifix.
It's strange, really, because underneath it all, he is a child killer, and the fact that you actually are sympathising with him is quite extraordinary. I do put that down to Robert's talent, being able to put it across.
Freddy had gone from being a rather nondescript menace to becoming a horror personality, the kind that you put on the covers of magazines.
7, 8, gonna stay up late.
Freddy likes his job. He likes this revenge. And he had this sense of humor and this personality. And the fans embraced that.
9, 10, never sleep again.
More than any iconic horror figure, I think Freddy is the #1 badass boogeyman of all time.
We got special work to do here, you and me. Everything has an Elm Street.
We all love a good monster. Creatures that haunt us, demons that taunt us, and ghouls that feed off our deepest, darkest fears. They are the unreasonable, destructive, unknown forces that we can't control. They threaten us with pain and embrace us with a kiss of death. Every culture, every religion, every story has its monsters, both in reality and in our worst nightmares.
Monsters control our lives in many ways. I mean, Hitler was a monster, you know. Death is a monster. The darkness is a monster. A frightening parent is a monster. There's things that have great power, are smarter than we are more knowing than we are, and can terminate our lives or grossly affect it.
We all grow up with fairy tales, monsters and creatures. And it's kind of interesting, actually. You're 5 years old, but your mother is sitting next to your bed and telling you like this bedtime story. And it's this super scary story about some monster eating children or something like that.
The fairy tale is always implied in these. I think, what is a nightmare but the rabbit hole, of one's subconscious.
The Greeks used to talk about the Apollonian and the Dionysian. The Apollonian was the thought of the lofty thoughts and order and civilization, and then the Dionysian is, the orgiastic and the drunken and the dancing wild, the Pan in the forest. And humans are always wrestling with those two things. And the Dionysian side, I think, is where horror films live. It's the nightmare side. It's the side of where civilization ends and random happenstance and violence and madness can rule.
All we've got are the old stories. And if we're going back to the classical, it's Beauty and the Beast or Death and the Maiden. Those are your stories. And Elm Street is absolutely that. Literally, here is the girl, here is the monster. The monster wants to kill the girl, and the girl fights back.
Hollywood had been in the monster business since the 30s. Horror movies exposed dark secrets of the human soul, and the genre attracted edgy and sophisticated filmmakers who used its conventions to break taboos, saying and showing what others wouldn't dare. Audiences loved to be scared, and by the late 1970s, the slasher film had sliced its way into becoming a popular brand of American cinema.
There had been a glut in the early 80s of The House on Sorority Row and the Slumber Party Massacre and all those.
Friday the 13th and Dawn of the Dead, My Bloody Valentine and Prom Night and all this stuff. were just gory movies just for the sake of being gory.
Halloween was out before Freddy, and so was Friday the 13th. And these characters just didn't have any personality. They were just, I always describe them as the Jaws shark. You know, they were just cold kind of killers, you know.
The 1980s were a very bland decade for most people. Audiences were out waiting for the next big horror icon, and there was nothing really out there at that time. And I think Freddy shook them up a bit.
All of a sudden, Nightmare on Elm Street comes along, and it brings a supernatural element again.
At the time, you know, Exorcist, about the devil, and Texas Chainsaw, which is based on a real story, and then later, Nightmare on Elm Street injects a new element into these films where it's partly funny in a way. It's horrifyingly scary.
I'm gonna split you in two.
And there is that supernatural component where Freddy really exists in dreams.
What the hell are dreams anyway?
Mysteries, incredible body hocus pocus. The truth is, we still don't know what they are or where they come from.
Dreams have always been the source of inspiration for storytellers. But nightmares unleashed their wild side. The celebrated classic monsters of literature were born out of the shadows of each author's mind. And Freddy Krueger would be no different.
I was very interested in dreams. I minored in psychology in college. I'd kept a dream journal for years and years. And I just had recently become really fascinated about the germ of an idea about somebody who could visit you, not only in your dreams, but in that sort of interstice between waking life and dream life. My parents went through a very rough sort of separation divorce when I was around 4, so I can remember not wanting to fall asleep, and I can still remember very vividly some of those nightmares. And I remember a conversation with my mother where I said, "Please come with me." And she said, "That's the one place I can't come with you to protect you. You have to go there alone." And that realization that, you know, it's in essence, it's like a grasp of death, because, you know, there's some places that just as an individual, no one can go with you. And that stayed with me the rest of my life. Freddy sort of came out in fragments of childhood experiences of a man who scared me when I was a little kid.
There's a story about he and his brother and some old guy on the street that Wes saw when he was a child. And he knew he looked through the window and closed the blinds. And then the mom and dad were out for dinner, and he looked through the window again like 15 minutes later, and that guy was just standing there looking back up at Wes and his brother's upstairs window. And then I think they went downstairs and looked through the little pinhole in the door, and the guy was standing in the front walkway in front of the house.
You know, I sort of put him together from just kind of speculating about what would be the best colors, the most jarring colors to put side by side for his stripes.
There was things that guy wore that Wes brought to Freddy that Wes maybe cannot enumerate and remember exactly what they were, but there's a sense of it, and all of the stuff that he put on Freddy adds up to it.
Wes Craven fashioned Fred Krueger into a repulsive, vile villain who was invoked by a nursery rhyme and prowled the neighborhoods of Anywhere, USA. Part deranged killer bent on revenge, part supernatural dream master whose powers seemed unlimited. Freddy was a monster of the worst kind.
Yeah, Freddy was, you know, he was somebody who preyed on children. It was the sense of just an adult who lacked all what a good adult should be, which is being protective of innocence and of children and nurturing of children. This was somebody who took pleasure in exploiting the innocence of children and killing them.
He's not killing teenagers having sex in the woods like some of the other slasher movies from the time. You know, and he's not killing just people in the neighborhood or out on Halloween. He's going after kids. That was like forbidden at the time too. I remember some of the criticism being that he's crossed the line, which Wes Craven loves to do.
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
The genius of the movie for me is the fact that Wes Craven realized that people were scared to sleep. The whole idea is that we're most vulnerable when we're asleep, and anything can happen to us. And we all think about that thing is, well, if we die in our dreams, will we die in real life? And he was the first person to actually put that into a movie and make something of it.
The thing about Freddy is he's not actually a dream. He's an intruder in a dream. The idea that someone can not only come into your bedroom, but can come into your head, it is a sort of a creepiness. And actually it is a terrifying thought that maybe even your dreams aren't your own. Yeah, maybe you can't even hold that. Yeah, the man is coming to get you.
You die.
When I was casting Freddy, Robert Englund came in. He was this little guy. I didn't think he looked at all like what I thought Freddy would look like. And he was able to approach the role with complete lack of worry that anybody would look at him and say, oh, there's horrible stuff inside of you. He didn't give a damn about anything like that, you know. So he just reveled in the role. And that really is what made Freddy work.
I think most of the character development came out of the movement, the body language. So there became a bit of a dance to Freddy. So that really went into how I played Freddy. That determined a lot, I remember.
Not only did he have the physical ability to play the character, he's very dynamic in those films. He's jumping around, he's jumping out of shadows. He's got a particularly creepy voice. I mean, you know, he really was the Vincent Price of the 1980s.
What's wrong, Joey? Feeling tongue-tied?
If I didn't have Robert Englund, I would have kept Freddy's mouth shut. But Robert has what people like Jack Nicholson had. There's a weird edge of danger to some performers. Even Jim Carrey has it. There's a weird sense that anything might happen with certain actors. And with Robert, he had it, and I knew I could take Freddy further, and I figured I'd trim back where we went too far, and we ended up using everything he said.
It's back in the saddle again.
No other actor could have sort of like pulled that off. It's hard to say that you want to cuddle a monster, but you actually wanted to cuddle him while you were still scared of him, and I think that's why it works, and that was the key to Robert's impersonation.
Back here, Dan!
Freddy always cracked wise, and Freddy was always a bit of a jester and a bit of a joker. And had this dark sense of humor that he used, turning teenage idiom back on itself.
Fuck the prime time, bitch!
Freddy's a smartass, and people love smartasses.
Robert, he came up with mannerisms. He made it a living, breathing person.
Please, God.
This is God.
This is God. You know, it's just like, whoa, you know, you can't write that. But Robert was a fountain of those things, you know, just ways of moving, ways of leering, ways of, you know, there was a scene in the boiler room, Nancy is, just before she burns herself to wake herself up, where he flicks his tongue like a snake.
Come to Freddy.
That wasn't written, but Robert just threw it in. It was like, oh, that's repulsive, you know.
I think we both kind of discovered Freddy after, you know, the 4.5 hours of makeup. And I discovered a lot in that mirror.
It's a memorable makeup for many different reasons. And I think David Miller in the first film and then Kevin Yeager in the sequels really presented a character who is so badly burned, but shows through the makeup. You can see that there's a man in there.
On Dream Warriors, the third film, we kind of made him look more like Robert, like he was coming out of his Freddy and becoming more human. So in designing it, I wanted to refine it more. I still had the old head cast, so I didn't have to take Robert's head cast over again. I made it less hooky-nosed, a little bit more like Robert, a little bit more like between Robert with the burn makeup and then the Freddy Krueger character. And looking back after that film was over and seeing there was something missing. It just suddenly became not Freddy to me. I missed the big cheekbones, I missed the wider, broader nose. And so on part 4, I went back and kind of split the difference, which is more like what this one behind here looks like, which is a little bit more detailed, but kind of went back to the broader cheeks and the wider nose.
It took 6 hours every morning to put the makeup on. It's a lot of little pieces. It's not just something that you pull over your head. And, you know, when you wear that stuff all day long, it's like you get rashes and everything, and it's like not a pretty sight. But he was game, and he was very cool with the kids, all the other actors and the crew. So it's definitely a good example for a lot of actors who are not so cool.
I was sitting one day with Heather and Johnny Depp in makeup, and I remember being about 3 hours into the makeup, almost done. And I remember looking over, and in their wonderful reclining pink leatherette barber's chairs was Heather and Johnny Depp, and they had these little fans. Now, here they were getting pampered and powdered, and I resented them. I resented their youth. I resented their beauty. I was in my early 30s. I wasn't sure if I should be doing this horror movie, you know, at this stage of my career. And I went, wait a minute, I can use that. I can use this envy. It was a very real, very honest thing as an actor. I could just go, you know, God damn it, she's starring in this movie. She looks beautiful. She has her whole life and career over. Here I am, you know, on part 4. You know, I've been in makeup for 6 hours. I've got, you know, things underneath my sweater. I've got wires running down my leg, hydraulics up my ass. A guy over here is going to baste me like a turkey with KY jumping. They're going to say action, and I've got to come up with something. And, oh, wait a minute, I can use that envy of Lisa. Oh, great. And I remember that. Yeah, that's what I used back. Okay. And I always had that right at my fingertips, at my knife blade tips. I had that to use.
Go ahead. Put it on. It's in your blood.
It's the glove that really captured the imagination of the fans. It's a wicked, vile killing machine, and you know, in some of the films it has a life of its own as well.
In the first movie, you never knew what Freddy Krueger's face looked like. You just saw this horrible weapon that he used. And I remember just seeing that going, what is going on?
I thought, what could be different? And trying to find something that was really went back to the earliest memories, racial memories, if you will, of humanity. And I thought something like the claws of a predator.
The weight of the original claw, the original gloved hand, the weapon. It weighed a lot. You know, walking around with the big one on dropped his shoulder a bit. And that gave a bit of a gunslinger posture to Freddy, too. So that, I mean, and that came to play.
Or just think about his personality. I always thought of the Wicked Witch of the West from Wizard of Oz, because she was a character that had personality. She wasn't just a monster. She actually teased her victims before torturing them.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little soul, too.
Freddy was very much like that. His character was written that way by Wes. You know, wrote that, you know, to be playful with his cat and mouse thing.
Who are you?
Freddy violates the teenage girl's bedroom. But the parents aren't allowed in teenage girls' bed. Freddy's in there. Freddy's looking through your drawers. Freddy's in your diary. Freddy's in your diary because Freddy knows your subconscious. Freddy knows your dreams. He knows your innermost thoughts and desires and fears. You know, Freddy's violated that. The sexuality was there. We all realized it sort of after the fact, but it was there because he's the bastard daddy of us all, you know, and girls and their daddies and stepfather and all of that implication that working with Heather in her pajamas, you know, for 3 months, that has to be there. I mean, sometimes there's a caress before there's a kill. It just had to be there. It was just part of the nature of the interaction. And then I started getting all this feedback from girls, all this sexual feedback. We'd put Freddy in bed a couple of times with these girls, you know, and I've always loved the idea that you roll over and there's Freddy next to you because he's in that world with you. And but that can't be anything but sexual. It's just, it's part of the component. I say to all the feminists and all of the critics of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, you know, there's always a woman warrior in every one of them, and she wins. She vanquishes Freddy.
Freddy's weakness is his ability from movie to movie to movie to get his ass kicked by women.
He never gets laid. Think about it. Probably be a lot happier, easygoing guy if we had a Mrs. Freddy.
Happy Father's Day.
When it came to sequels, Freddy was born ready. From his very first kill, he had audiences wrapped around his finger blades. Freddy wasted no time in stealing the spotlight, and there wasn't anything Hollywood, America, or your parents could do to stop him.
I said, where's the fucking bourbon? You should listen to your mother.
Making kills bigger and badder is a danger of these movies because you do the first movie the vista's wide open for the possibilities of the things that you can do. And as you do more movies, it constricts because you become required to do more and more. You know, hit more of the tropes, repeat more of the things that work.
There was going to be a very magical sequence, really. There was the one kid who thought he was a wizard. And that battle with Freddy was going to be this sort of shape-shifting battle. It goes from sword-wielding knight to dragon to cyclops to whatever, right? And that's a pretty ambitious sequence for a movie that cost about $4 million even back then. So that was like, let's get rid of that right away, and you know, we'll wear a silly cape and go Alakazam, and then Freddy will just stab him.
Sorry, kid. I don't believe in fairy tales.
One of the major images for me in the movies is when Freddy sliced open the guy's veins and he's using that as a puppet. That, to me, I think, was the epitome of 80s horror.
You don't get into this to have people go, well, that thing you did, that really sucked, you know? No, you get into this to try and please people, not to disappoint them or piss them off. So that it pleases so many people, I think is awesome.
The kills got so big that by the time of Nightmare 5, I mean, where you have that motorcycle gag in Nightmare 5, I mean, that's totally into Giger territory, that's totally into Transformers territory, and all bets are off. Freddy can do anything.
This boy feels the need for speed.
The more outrageous and surreal I think Freddy became,
Oh, how about this, Doc?
the more I particularly liked him.
I love soul food.
I think we pushed it too far, and intentionally so. The fans loved Freddy's sense of humor and Freddy's personality. They loved it.
Daddy's waiting for you, little girl.
Shut the fuck up, man!
With Freddy, he became this very flippant, very gag-orientated bogeyman that the kids and the fans and the audiences loved. That's not to say that he wasn't a huge success.
I felt he got too jokey and that it got into too many special effects and everything else. But the fact is that, you know, it went on for, 5 sequels very strongly.
Wes's film already pierced the subconscious pop culture we have. So I used that. I used the Dick Cavett Welcome to Primetime line because Freddy was already there.
It got to the point where it was like anything that was happening at that time was actually in the movie. Roseanne was in one, wasn't she? I mean, she was popular in the sitcom. Drag Her In, you know. Johnny Depp coming back, you know, Alice Cooper. Just went on and on. Zsa Zsa Gabor, for heaven's sake. You know, so on and so on.
Can I ask you something?
Certainly.
Who gives a fuck what you think?
Part of that whole 80s guest out where characters became bigger than the things they were in. And the thing about Freddy was America particularly took this child murderer, this serial killer, to their heart and made him a pop icon.
Every one of those lines has become iconic. You know, I can't tell you. I probably have to sign, "Welcome to prime time, bitch," which I invented, which is my line, which is my coinage, 35 times a week.
Nightmare on Elm Street, even as a phrase, has amazed me. I mean, I saw it, Jon Stewart used it like a month ago on, the economy, Nightmare on Wall Street. I mean, it pops up all the time.
I remember doing a publicity run in New York, and it was the Greenwich Village Halloween parade. And then I worked the crowd in full drag as Freddy, full detailed Kevin Yeager makeup, but I had an overcoat on. And a third of the way through the parade, I started to flash people. Now, I was dressed as Freddy with the sweater and the oily, greasy slacks and the work boots, but girls started blowing me kisses.
I remember doing a public appearance with Robert Englund once up in Marin County, and the audience was full of parents and the little kids, like 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds. I'll never forget this, and I'm back there thinking, oh God, I'm such a horrible person. And we walked down on stage, and all these silent kids suddenly stood to their feet as Robert walked out and said, "Freddy, Freddy." I actually put that in New Nightmare.
I'm back and I'm better than ever! Yeah!
Audiences fell in love with that because if they didn't, they wouldn't have had half the merchandising on Freddy that they have, which included, by the way, for a very brief period of time. Freddy Jammies for children.
When they're promoting A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, one of the things they gave away to the press was a Freddy Krueger alarm clock, which, when you think about it, is quite a clever tie-in.
I went to a Halloween parade, I think around the time of Nightmare on Elm Street 4, and I've never seen so many Freddys walking down the street.
Freddy's dead was supposed to be the final nail in his coffin. But New Line understood they couldn't keep their main boogeyman down. Freddy fed off fear, especially fear driven by box office receipts. And as Wes Craven came to realize, it was time for a new nightmare.
I thought you killed Freddy off.
Well, we did, but the fans, the fans, God bless them, they're clamoring for more.
Bob came to me and said, we've killed Freddy, but we think maybe we'd like to do one more movie if you can think of a way of bringing him back. I only had a couple of weeks. I just went around and talked to everybody. I looked up Robert. I hadn't seen him in years, and talked to him, and I talked to Heather Langenkamp, who I'd seen a couple of times. And then it was I just had this sort of flash moment where it'd be really interesting to do a movie about all of us who had made the film, if the films had stopped, and that it somehow profoundly affected our lives, that it released something because the story was not being told.
You should do that.
Too late. I'm almost there.
Almost there. New Nightmare is my favorite in the franchise. I love playing ourselves or versions of ourselves, but I also like the what if Freddy's evil was so strong that it could permeate reality, and he could actually get even and punish all of us who had made money and had great success off of his exploiting his evil and his story, and punish us just much like Freddy punishes, the vigilante parents that burned him alive.
It didn't mean that I thought Freddy was the devil. And unfortunately, sometimes when you're filming something, you say, ooh, that's not quite what I meant, but that's what we have to shoot today. But that was the notion, was that whatever I called Freddy and put in that costume and everything else was something that has been around under other names, other shapes since the dawn of mankind.
Craven himself, by making New Nightmare, kind of put Freddy back in the box. It says, yeah, it's all very well, and this is what he represents, and this is an aspect of him, but he is just this. And I think Craven is quite entitled to do that, and I think that it was a very brave and a very interesting thing to do with your own creation.
For almost 30 years, Freddy Krueger has kept us awake, stealing our secrets and turning our terrors against us in the most cruel and unusual ways. He proved monsters could be just as much fun as they were deadly. And, like our nightmares, he was too big and too bad for anyone to control.
As crazy as it is, you can believe in the world of Elm Street. There was something beautiful about the limited budget of the original Elm Street series, of the charisma that Robert Englund brought to that diabolical character.
Freddy has become James Bond of horror films, so you have to treat him with that kind of cool, heroic appreciation. Of course, we still want him to be horrifically scary and all these things, but he is the hero he's the cult hero of the series.
He's probably the first monster that really has a personality, a specific personality, and he relishes this revenge predator haunt that he's on.
Robert Englund stands up there with Boris Karloff, with Christopher Lee, go back to Lon Chaney, Anthony Perkins. These were actors who created indelible cultural icons that stay in our subconscious.
It was Robert Englund who created that character.
He is Freddy Krueger, and always will be Freddy Krueger.
The role of Freddy Krueger will follow me, into my obituary column. Now I'm on to probably my third or fourth generation of fans. But I get now, more than ever, crayon drawings of Freddy by 8, 9, 10-year-old kids, over and over. because it's the nightmare. The nightmare is universal. I'm sort of proud to be part of it.
I'm kind of proud to have created Freddy Krueger. I don't know quite exactly where he came from. Maybe he just used me as a portal to come in, you know? But he's one of my favorite children.
So, let this be a warning to those who sleep, perchance to dream. The only thing to fear is fear himself.